Welcome, everybody. I am Jessica Cochlone. I am the Executive Director here with Shenandoah National Park Trust, and we are the official philanthropic partner to Shenandoah National Park. And our mission is to make strategic investments in programs and projects in Shenandoah. And we fund a variety of projects from education programs to overlooks and trail maintenance, invasive species removal, and tons of forest resilience, as well as historical preservation, which is what we're here to talk about tonight. And we're super excited about this project. It's taken us many, many years to get here. It was a project started years ago, and it got kind of derailed by COVID and then some leadership changes at the park, um, and then we kind of come forward, and this project really became possible, one, because of some extraordinary donors who made the investment and really believed in the importance of historic preservation, and specifically this cabin we're going to be talking about tonight. But also because of AJ Lochart, who is the exhibit specialist for Shenandoah National Park. He brings 20 years experience and was previously a preservationist for Manassas Battlefield, where he received the 2021 National Park Service Award Frontline Hero of the Year, the highest honor for maintenance employee in the national park. He is a skilled and passionate preservationist, and he's really made this project come to life. And for those of you guys who don't know, Boulder Cabin is a cabin that predates the park. It was one of the original cabins during the Addie Pollock's time. It will be the intention for Boulder Cabin, once it's completed, hopefully this summer, will be the home of our Artist in Residence program. Tonight, joining AJ, we have Katherine Wonson. Katherine holds a master's degree in historic preservation for Columbia University and built her career at the National Park Service, where she served as the director of the Western Center for Historic Preservation, Cultural Resource Branch lead for Grand Teton National Park, and lead historic preservation training manager, overseeing preservation training programs across the entire national park system. During her tenure, she spearheaded the $3 million rehabilitation of Whitegrass Ranch, transforming it into NPS's first and only overnight historic preservation training facility, and launched the BEST workshop series, which has trained over 1,400 students in preservation trades. A James Marston Finch Fellow with a certificate in architectural conservation from the University of Pennsylvania, Katherine has since founded Old School Heritage Solutions and the Teton Trust for Historic Places, bringing her expertise to preservation projects beyond the National Park Service. And I'm so excited to have AJ and Katherine here. We're just very lucky to be having this conversation. And now I'll kick it over to AJ.
Can you guys see me okay? Am I back? Can you see me? Okay. I'm just making sure my PowerPoint's correct. It just gave me a different okay, so hi everyone. I'm AJ or Alex Lockhart. I'm honored to be in front of you guys right now. This has been a very fun project, a project that couldn't be done without everyone in this meeting room and without Jessica and Molly and everybody there at the Trust. I genuinely believe that. I feel very blessed and fortunate to have an opportunity to work on this project. Whenever you take on I've been here doing this for 20 years. Whenever you take on a preservation project, it does take a bit of your energy and your soul from you. I mean, you really feel a close kinship and connection to those who preceded you in the cabin, and Pollock himself. Like you can feel the energy of this building living even today when we're making our decisions. So with that in mind, I just want to look at we're going to go over this slideshow, or I'm going to give you kind of the meat and potatoes. More things have been done, but this is what I had photos of. It's been harder to get up there and get photos as the winter's been going on. It's quite dark up there and brittly cold. But so starting here with this first slide, we have a park photograph of Boulder Cabin. If you look closely to the left, this gets into some of the decisions we already begin making. With the first photo I see, we have some folks we don't know. We don't know we don't have the identity of these folks on the octagonal porch here. But what we do see here is a 4-course poplar bark siding. And this is something that we're going. It was a common style around Skyland. It's something that we let's see how I'm doing this. No, it's not letting me see my notes. Oh, here we go. We have our 4-course poplar bark siding here on this side. And then if you look at the photograph on the right, that photograph was from the 1930s, most likely just after the CCC Skyland One company came in and started doing rehabilitations on the cabins. If you can see, there's 13 courses of what we know now to be Wormy chestnut. So this in itself led to many discussions between our park staff, as the building's exterior can express a period of significance for Skyland as a resort. What we ultimately determined was that instead of going back to the poplar bark, which we did attempt, we were going to stay with the Wormy chestnut because it still tethered itself to our style, our park's inception, the architecture styling that comes from the Civilian Conservation Corps. And it wasn't worth reversing back to the earlier 1912 period of significance for our park's sake. You can go to the next slide. Okay. So if you look at this photo here, I'm assuming everybody's looking at the same photo. This photo was what I didn't take the photo of this deflection, but I can attest my first day working on the job at Shenandoah, maybe it was the first week, we drove up there, snow on the ground, and they walked me up to the side of they walked me up to Boulder, and it was quite jarring seeing the deflection of this northeast corner of Boulder Cabin. Um, it was probably equally as distressing going inside of the building, as I recognized all the interior siding was down, but as much deflection is on the outside wall here, there was equal deflection on every east, west, south, north wall. So that was cause for some concern with the different load compounding forces on the load bearing structure. But my confidence was eased, or my stress was eased, as I looked at some of the intact Wormy chestnut framing. I recognized that things were pretty solid throughout, which in my case, working around the East Coast, it's very rare to have ground contacting lumber still with some integrity left. Usually with the moisture and the atmosphere around Virginia and Pennsylvania, everything ground contact that's not treated rots pretty rapidly. Here it was actually fairly stable, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that it's sitting on the crest of a hill on a pretty severely sloped mountain with winds. You can go to the next slide, Molly. Okay. So here what you can see, our first, prior to my tenure here, park preservationist Lonnie Mays and current preservationist Sean Bradley. You can see on the left side picture, they marked and identified every stone face they could. We put it in an image and we saved it so for future preservation efforts, restoration efforts. And the thought from HBTC, the draft of who drafted our project here, the thought was that the hearth was pulling the back wall out. What we definitely learned was that it actually wasn't. They were pretty well separated, and there was some time taken to have separated them in the 1930s, I think. But either way, we had the chimney down, and if you look in this photo on the bottom right photo, we dug out a proper footing, poured, I don't know, 2 foot of concrete beneath it, and that gave us an option to go in and rebuild the chimney. So you can go to the next slide, Molly. So here is an example. This was hard to capture the sheer challenge here, but I think it does a good job in the second picture. This is our middle spanning beam, and here you can see it with modern lumber attached to it, but the crawl space was quite low. So we were in there on our sides. I think we had cups. We were using shovels. We were using the backs of our hammers. It was quite hard to dig around. I got a real good taste of the Appalachian mountain range when I was trying to dig out this footer. I'll look here. Another funny aside actually is we were doing this. It was probably months of digging, maybe a month of digging in the early spring last year. And as soon as we were done, our former maintenance chief was walking the Appalachian Trail, and he stumbled upon the cabin. We chatted a little bit. We were just done, wiping the sweat off our faces from being done and feeling accomplished. And he asked us, he said, well, I thought you guys were going to raise the cabin. My plan was to raise it 6 feet, and you guys didn't have to dig underneath like that. And while we laughed at the time, I really wish he had told us 2 days earlier before his departure. Oh, I clicked too far. But that last photo as well, like I think that shows some of the cribbing. And that was quite the effort trying to stitch and bear the weight of the load-bearing sections, because when you're trying to bear the load of a building that's already out of whack and off its plates and off its structural components, you just don't know without a lot of over engineering whether you're carrying the full breadth of the building. So you could see in that last photo there, that is what we were trying to do. We stitched materials we basically created a superstructure with modern materials and stitched them into the extant solid old framing, and then we would lift it from that point. And then Molly, you can go to the next slide, I think. Okay, here, what you can see in these pictures, this is just an example of a corner post. At some point, we got all of the piers up and all of the blocking in. And once we got to that point, we had to get the materials in. You can see here in that second photo, we couldn't figure out how we were going to get the 40 bags of concrete into that hole easily. So what we did was we had the floor open, we created a little sled, and it ended up being a very luckily successful endeavor. You can see here, this was the red bucket. We had to drag the concrete underneath the cabin, and it was such a shallow crawl space that we had to scoop it out with an ice cream scoop or an ice maker scoop. I'm looking here. You can see an example on the top right. You can kind of see what the pier to post connection looks like when it's done. Most of that stuff will be hidden and obscured by siding, but at least we know now that the building is we affixed 26 piers to this cabin, and to each of those footers you see there with the concrete. I believe they were 34 inches deep and at least 2 foot around. So they were significant, substantial concrete piers to put this on. Molly, you can go to the next slide. This right here, when they were drawing them, this was our biggest cross to bear, I think, was this, what was called in the HSAR, the Historic Structures Report. They guessed that this rock was some type of bedrock. It was, I can attest, it was quite a challenge getting it out. It was the size of probably a bathtub. And that is I believe that is a source of um our deflection in the building. That point right there was holding everything else while other piers were settling and collapsing. That rock was holding everything in out of alignment. So removing that was pretty pivotal for us. We also think it's possible that that was why Boulder Cabin was named Boulder, because there was giant bedrocks that were quite hard to navigate around. I'm trying to think. Molly, I think you're good with that slide. You can go to the next one. Okay. So here's the bedroom. A look at the bedroom. So if you look at this, this was one of those ones where it took hours to mentally just prepare for the potentiality of us lining up a hearth appropriately or inappropriately based on what we're given to start with. If you look on the left photo, you can see we have a green line that goes up. You can see from 0, it probably is out 9 inches to the top. So that side of the wall's deflected out on that rock. And then on the right side of it, it was kind of separating and splaying apart. So trying to draw a, with the masonry team coming in, it was very challenging to get a perfectly square chimney. And if you look on the picture on the right, I promise you that chimney's perfect, but it might look a little wonky just looking at it. So it was always a fun house of mirrors trying to pick plumb and straight. So we were pulling it off the front of the building that we knew was true and the porch side, and that was how we were able to do that. But there was a great amount of stress when approaching that chimney, knowing that that chimney was going up, and when it's up, it's up. So everything can't move at that point. I'm trying to see. So that photo in the middle, you can see there was plumbing. There was that corner was an old, really small bathroom, and it was very substandard. It was a very substandard spot. There was a lot of problems there on a load bearing wall, and I guess we'll get more into that in the next photo. So you can go to the next one, Molly, please. So here we have this section right here. You can see the boulder on the left photo. That's another one of those bedrock, like super solid boulders. We thought about taking it out. We didn't have to take it out. We could go around it. That's what I did. I had to scribe around that boulder, but you can see what it looked like kind of going underneath this building. We had to deal like those types of um, impositions were everywhere in this cabin with the boulders underneath, and then you dig a pier and there'd be a giant boulder underneath. So it was that was quite a labor. However, this was kind of a satisfying fix for me. Is we had that wall above the top of the boulder was a load bearing wall. It was only being held on to the joist that you see on the left side. I can't point to it, but it was only being held on maybe by an inch and a half. So it was really close to slipping. So I was able to double that with a brand new 2x8 and scribed and contoured the 2x8 to fit against the center beam. And now it's completely supporting that load bearing wall. And then we were able to beef up that load bearing wall afterwards. But knowing how close it was, that just goes to show how challenging it is when you're lifting a structure that not everything that you're lifting is tethered like you would think it would be with a modern house. On the picture on the right, that was earlier in the spring. There's been some work since then, but that's kind of an example of what the chimney's looking like, and the floor around there is looking like since we've stitched it in there. We took existing floorboards that we had. There was some leftover space pieces, and we kind of stitched them back in, and then we'll still have to refinish those spots with holes and stuff later. But yeah, so we can go to the next one, Molly. Now I have to go to the next slide. So here is this was when we removed, so this was how far the deflection was in the floor and how out of plumb everything was prior to our pulling the stone out. So what you'll see here is just like when we lowered it, everything now goes to this new grade. This is our new grade. When we drop the floor, everything now is pretty much true all the way around. Molly, you can go to the next one. Okay, here's an example, just real quick. I'm going to try to keep time brief. On the left side, you can kind of see with the green line, that was where how out of rack the building was when we started. We borrowed a grip hoist from the trails team. The first one almost broke, so we had to get a more powerful grip hoist because it was under such a load. So we started to use a grip hoist. We were able to pull out about 3 inches of the lean, but we had to stop. We could have pulled all the lean out. However, in 1937 or 1939, the CCC had reblocked some of the framing in that building. So had we kept going, we would have counteracted their fixes, and we would have had to fix what they had done. And we were, that was going to be more than we could have handled, I think. There would have been just too many other things go wrong if we went past that point. So this was the furthest we could go without compromising the Wormy siding and all the things that had been accounted for by the CCC. And then if you look at the picture on the third picture in, you can see this is the old Wormy siding beginning to go up. So if you look at it, it's very regular. It fits nicely, and it doesn't appear to have any pitch or bad or incongruency that way. And then the last picture on the right is the only picture I have of the back wall that I could find today. But you can see, I think you can see that we've pulled it in dramatically on that back wall. We rebuilt it, we restabilized everything, and went from pier to rafter with it and tied everything together. And quite proud of how that's looking. But that was all the only photo I had of it. Molly, you can go to the next one. And since I'm getting a little tight on time here, I'll just kind of go over this. This was the section, the bathroom area, the sill plate, the rear sill plate was in really bad shape. We pulled it out, and this is kind of the interface of us reinstalling the sill. We had 20 foot of sill plate to repair. The sill is the lower load spanning beam we use. Molly, you can go to the next one. Okay, so this was the most anxiety inducing portion of the project by 100. So if you look here on the left photo, you'll see 2x8s. We lap them with carriage bolts, and we span through load section to load section to try to capture the wall. So that way, and then they're on outriggers, and we would jack them up and get it. We had to free the wall from the sill plate that was rotten, and we had to go 21 foot, which is a long span. And there's a lot of gradients between 21 foot. And you can see here in the middle photo, that was the type of issue we run into. We would jack the floor up, and it would kind of crack, or it was really rough shape there because of the bathroom, and there was a lot of moisture there. The only place in the building that was unsound was this section right here. So when you remove, so if you look at that picture where you can see Joel in the corner, that was the biggest moment of truth. Did our efforts work, or is this building going to collapse right here? And it worked well. And you can see on the right side, everything's tied together, tethered together neatly, doubled line or double blocked. And I think the entire building now is within a half inch of level all the way across, which is a great feat for a building like this with these types of issues. You can go to the next one, Molly. Here is a little picture of the roof. First, when I pulled the roof, the tarp off for the first time, it felt like running my hands through like a garden loaded with topsoil. There was nothing there. There was nothing but wood pulp and shavings and mud and dirt and grime. It was quite easy to take off, except all the nails were just sitting there. So we had to remove the nails. what we had realized, if you look at the second picture, that is the amount of variance between, that is how much the roof sagged over time. That the ridge beam, the center beam there, the ridge beam is plumb now, and everything else was riding like that. That's how much deflection there was because of the improper rafters. And then if you look at the picture second to the right, that is how much the outside wall plate was coming off. And I wish I included, but we pulled that all back in. We drove that back in and rebuilt that top plate there to accommodate our new 2x10 rafters that we put in there. Once we took off our, so if you look at the picture on the right, all of that is Wormy Chestnut. It was plank siding. It was just tongue and groove planking that was on there. We salvaged every piece we could, and we at least banded. Our decision was to band that roof in accessible areas that people would see, so people wouldn't recognize that we had plywood in the middle. So, and that's a strategy we use. You know, it's not inappropriate to use new materials if that's all we have, but we try to salvage every component, and that takes time that not everybody would choose. Molly, we can go to the next one. Here's just the kitchen. The photo on the right, it's a little compressed, but I just don't know how to, I didn't know how to merge it onto the screen. But if you look on the, so we pulled all the piers off the post in the kitchen. We didn't know how poorly framed the kitchen was until later. Like you can see this, the picture on the far left is a plumbing pipe that was actually holding a great amount of weight on it. So it was almost a structural plumbing pipe at this point. So had we had known the floor was in such bad disrepair, we would have probably just dug our footers straight from inside that kitchen where you can see Joel's legs there. That would have saved us a lot of effort of being on our backs digging. But either way, we got the building, we got it back, we redid the roof, we put the windows back in there, we insulated, and it's pretty good to go now. Okay, Molly, you can go to the next one. I think I'm almost done here. Here's just our windows. This is an example of the windows prior to our involvement. And then as you look, you can see the natural light coming in. The third photo is a stripped, is just a restored window. There's no repairs to it other than stripped completely, reglazed with linseed oil glazing and oiled up. And then on the right, you can see an example of just a restored sash. I don't think we lost much at all for window integrity. They all are pretty good shape right now. Molly, you can go to the next one. And then real quick, this was just the poplar bark. We just snapped it up there real quick to see what it was going to look like. That was going to be the appearance of that poplar bark siding that you saw in that first picture of the slideshow. What we ended up going with was on the right side, you can see the old extant Wormy chestnut. So what we had to do was we found a lumber mill that will mill exactly how this Wormy chestnut was milled through a circular sawmill. They'll mill white oak for us. But that was a hard lift too, just finding somebody who makes shingles this large, because these are 30-inch reveals, which is quite large. Here's a little of this was the siding. I'm sorry, Molly, I didn't tell you to go ahead. You can go to the next one, Molly. Almost done. So this is just an example. I had a volunteer working for us. We had him abrade and clean without ruining the patina. His goal, he just lightly brushed and wiped down these boards. And this is what it looks like when it's oiled up and finished. It's going up very nicely. And they did a really good job stabilizing all that. So it'll still have its character. Didn't sand it, didn't mill it. We just let it hold its age. And then we'll go to the last slideshow and let Katherine go. Currently what we're working on, it's been a long winter, but here we are in Fredericksburg and we have sister parks around the area. And I don't know if in Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania so graciously gave us their support. They're sending a team of 7 for 2 weeks to come up and help on our roof. And then they'll probably also help on the oak siding. And then Manassas Battlefield, my former park, has offered 3 preservationists to come, and it just goes to show how much folks around the Park Service care for these structures as well. And to close, I'm going to hand this off to my good friend and mentor, Katherine Wonson.
You're muted,
But,
Katherine.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, AJ. And yeah, we structured our presentation in a very certain way. We wanted you to experience and see the blood, sweat, and tears of putting Humpty Dumpty back together. And I think AJ is modest, and those photos don't even do justice to kind of the extreme conditions, how out of plane and out of whack and almost impossible with things like boulders and crawling under the building to dig it out, that this project is, and what a testament it is to AJ for his creativity and kind of out of the box thinking about how to accomplish that. So we intentionally wanted to start with showing you the up close of the decisions that are made on a project like Boulder Cabin, the small little nuances like taking apart they're not very small in the moment, but taking apart the chimney and putting it back together. And then my role here is to zoom out a little bit and put this in context. And hopefully some of you are on here because you're interested about historic preservation and what does this mean. So we'll be using the Boulder Cabin as an example of the larger preservation process. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start with, that was a lot of work. It was a lot of times AJ used the word stress. So it may beg the question of why bother? And I could do a multi-day presentation just on why bother preserving these historic structures, but I'm going to focus on just a few key reasons that I think are most meaningful in Shenandoah. And I know I'm showing pictures from the west. The photo on the left is Old Faithful in Yellowstone. The photo on the right is the Molten Barn in Grand Teton National Park, where I am based. But I picked these very intentionally because we often think of national parks and we think of natural beauty and we think of the wildlife and the mountains. But I am one who believes, and there's a lot of data to back this up, that we need to see ourselves in context with the natural world. In fact, there are no truly wild places left, even in national parks. The most out there places are even touched by climate change. And so national parks are our cultural concept, right? They are, the wildness and wilderness always involves humans. And so it's really important to see ourselves historically. How did, a settler coming to Jackson Hole, how did they relate to the landscape? And there's a lot that barn and the shape of the roof says about how they related to their landscape. And I think Shenandoah is a wonderful place to talk about that, because knowing before the park was created, there were many farmsteads and many people that lived there, and that the creation of the park removed many of those kind of cultural imprints, right? So preservation is a really important way that we can continue to tell the story of how we relate to these wild places. Next slide. Another reason, I love this, is a Winston Churchill quote: "We shape our buildings and afterwards our buildings shape us." So the photos towards the top are the historic photos, and towards the bottom are kind of before the project got started, and then the project underway last time I was there back in September. But there's a ton of data on the psychological and emotional effect, and I'll just tell you one of my favorite statistics. There's a 2018 study that revealed that subjects reported an average of 40% increase in well-being and a 60% decrease in cortisol levels when experiencing historic environments. So these places bring us peace and enjoyment and well-being. And then next slide. If I didn't get you with the academic and the emotional, perhaps sustainability speaks to you. I love this ad campaign from the National Trust for Historic Preservation from the early 2000s. And I don't know if they coined the term, but they really were the beginning of the use of the expression, "the greenest building is the building already built," right? How can we reuse our historic structures? Photo in the middle is a Boulder Cabin window that AJ was talking about that is restored. That has embodied energy in that window, as in the carbon footprint has already happened when they cut down the tree however many years ago, with much stronger, denser old growth wood to make that beautiful sash, and to throw that to a landfill to put in a more modern window, even when we consider energy efficiency, and we can upgrade historic structures to make them more efficient. And so the chart on the right just shows that new construction accounts for 11% of, sorry, off my screen. There we are. Of carbon emissions globally. And so preserving can be one way in which we can help with sustainability, as we also help at that 28% and create more efficient buildings as well through our retrofits of historic buildings. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so what is preservation? Let's say you inherit Uncle Marv's 1940s Willie's Jeep, and you're in the position of figuring out what to do with it. Next slide. Perhaps you're one of those people that likes to go to military car shows and you need to make it roadworthy and you need to update the blinkers and put in a new clutch and a new engine and new bumpers. Is that preservation? Next slide. Or maybe you're in Joshua Tree National Park at the Keys Ranch, and it is part of the cultural landscape and the story of this quite crazy miner and his claim, and the work involved is stabilizing the paint and supporting the axles and stabilizing the fabric on the inside. Is that preservation? Well, we're not the first to think of this, and after the 1966 National Historic Preservation Act, it was actually on everyone's mind because we had decided as a nation we were going to preserve things, but no one had really defined what we meant by that. What is preservation? And so we developed these 4 types of preservation. Next slide. And I like to think of it in terms of a clock. So historic preservation is the general term, right? You can throw that around all you want. And then these are the 4 subtypes. And preservation, of course, is one of the subtypes, which gets a little confusing. And we're going to go through each one. And then we'll talk about what Boulder falls under and why the decisions AJ and crew made fit so nicely in that preservation standard. Next slide. So preservation as a treatment is this kind of arresting time, stopping it where it is, sustaining kind of the form and integrity as you found it. So this is a stabilized cabin at the Barbie Sea Dude Ranch. Next slide. Rehabilitation is when we make room for new uses, and that may mean alterations and additions. And we're going to do that while still preserving integrity and character. And so photo on the left is historic. Photo on the right is our ADA accessible cabin at the Whitegrass Ranch here in Grand Teton National Park. So we had to accommodate new use, right? So this is moving the clock forward. This is moving the building into the future. Next slide. Restoration, which is often the term that gets thrown around as the generic, but it actually is quite a specific term. And many of you are probably familiar with Montpelier. It was purchased by the National Trust in order to tell the James and Dolly Madison story. So they took the 20th century modifications, top left, that the DuPonts had made, who are quite significant themselves as a family, and they peeled back. So this is turning the clock back. So a lot of house museums you go to, it feels like it was the day Fanny Farmer was in the cabin. That is often restoration as the treatment. And then last, next slide, thank you, is reconstruction. If for some reason you are missing a really important historic resource to tell the story, this is a case of the quarters of the enslaved people at Magnolia Plantation. It was made with lime and cochina, so it had basically melted in the landscape, and they wanted to tell the story of the enslaved people at the plantation, and so they reconstructed from that foundation the building. Used very seldom in the Park Service. You need to have excellent documentation and a really compelling reason to do it. All right, next slide. So I've gone through these 4, and if we were in a classroom setting, I'd ask you to guess which one Boulder Cabin is. And you would guess, of course, correctly, that it's a rehabilitation. We are integrating a new use for the artists and residents. So we are going to have, modern amenities in the kitchen. We're not going to have a pull flush toilet. It's going to be a real modern flush toilet. We are not turning back the clock in the Boulder Cabin. So this would be rehabilitation. But rehabilitation and all these treatments can be a slippery slope. How do you stop at the point of the photo on the left, which is, let's call it a tasteful rehabilitation of a Willie's Jeep, and make sure that we don't get into the remodeling world And how do you know what changes to make, how many changes are appropriate, what things you can make changes to? Well, we have a little bit of a system, and I will not go into it, obviously, for this kind of presentation. There's a whole framework we go through, but there are two key concepts. So next slide. And they were very key with the Boulder Cabin in thinking through any upgrades and changes and modifications to integrate new uses and new systems. So we identify something called character defining features. So this is a barn here in the Tetons. This is just an example of kind of the analysis we do, but it's basically what makes that building that building. What if you took away, if that roof shape suddenly became a gable roof or a flat roof, right? You would really alter the building to a point where it no longer has its character. So we literally call out roof shape, the setting that it's in, the types of windows, the slatted details on the cupola, and those become the protected features. So with Boulder Cabin, AJ mentioned the siding, the handrails, the shape of the roof, its setting enclosed in the trees. If you move that to a completely open field, you would lose the character. So that is how we make sure once we pick one of those treatments, that we don't slide down the slippery slope to the point where we've lost the thing we are trying to preserve and lost the character. Next slide. And so this is just an example from my world, the Whitegrass Ranch, which I helped to rehabilitate. So similar to an artist in residence, we use it as a training center. So the bottom photos are modern use, people eating in the dining room, and the historic photos on top of what that would have been set up as a guest ranch. But we have fire suppression systems, we have ramps, we have a grease trap in the kitchen, we have all the modern amenities, but we made sure to hang on to the character defining features so you still have that experience. Next slide. And if you hang on to the character defining features, AJ used this word a few times in his presentation, you ensure that you retain the historic integrity. That's a key word in historic preservation. You want to retain the integrity. And a good layperson way to put it is, would the person from the past recognize it? So the Ames Monument on the left, obviously those workers, if they could just turn their head and see the rest of the monument, would certainly recognize it. Bottom photo on the right is a project I'm working on right now, and the roof angles have been dramatically changed since the historic period, and it really has lost integrity. All right, so next slide, please. So why Shenandoah National Park Trust, right? You may be compelled, okay, I see why we should preserve these places, and I understand kind of what treatment we've chosen and how we're gonna make sure we do that to the right degree. But hey, these are National Park Service buildings, and I can speak in a wonderful position, having been worked for the Park Service for 17 years, but now in the private sector. So I can speak to the realities in the Park Service. And so I'll just give you three numbers. The number on the left is 21.9 billion. That is the amount of deferred maintenance in 2024 for everything: historic, non-historic, roads, so assets, but historic or non-historic. The number in the middle, 7.8 billion, is the amount of deferred maintenance on just historic assets. For context, 3.6 billion is the entire operating and maintenance budget for the National Park Service. So it's everything from changing out toilet paper rolls to painting buildings to paving roads to every kind of maintenance position you can imagine. That's for the entire Park Service, for all 419 units, 3.6 billion. So as you can see, they will never touch the 7.8 billion. So we're in a huge situation where we're chasing our tail. We can never, everything is a drop in the bucket. Next slide. So don't panic. I know this is a very complicated graph, and I didn't want to put it in, but I did, because every dot on here represents a historic building in Grand Teton National Park. And the higher it is up on the chart, the more significant it is. So a National Historic Landmark would be a 100. And then the further to the right something is, the worst condition it's in. So I put that orange circle there because those are the buildings that, even according to the Park Service's own rubric, basically says you should either be replacing it, stabilizing it, putting it into excess, removing it. And those are historic buildings. The law will not allow them to do that, but just following kind of the guidance of what the facilities world would tell them to do. So of that really scarce money, they certainly cannot put it towards the buildings that are in that orange circle. And I will tell you, from working in the Park Service and knowing the reality of the short funding, things that are in that rehabilitate zone, so a little bit to the left, they also do not have money to take care of those. They're basically able to take care of that kind of top left quadrant. So that is why places like the Shenandoah National Park Trust are so important, because it's not that the Park Service doesn't think these buildings are important, and it's not that the law doesn't say that we need to be preserving and using these buildings. They simply do not have the funding to get at that. So the work you all do is so important in protecting our heritage. Next slide. I think the upside of this huge gap and the Park Service needing someone to step in is that there's huge opportunity. I think if the Park Service magically could take care of all of its historic buildings, I think what we would miss is a connection with the public and their historic buildings, because a lot of these buildings, you know, the Boulder Cabin was a ranger station. So it was used by Park Service employees. There was not really a connection to the public. And I love this photo on the left. This is a campaign the National Trust ran years ago called This Place Matters, but I love that there are youth holding This Place Matters sign. So the best way we're going to engage the next generation in protecting these places is for them to be in them and using and donating and volunteering. So I think a place like Boulder Cabin with its Artist in Residence program is an amazing opportunity to help the next generation and just the public in general see that these historic places in our national parks belong to the public, and they are part of kind of our responsibility too, not just the agencies. And last slide is just any questions. That's AJ and his stressed face.
I have some user submitted questions, but I want to just hold it open for a minute or two to see if anybody wants to drop. We can't see anybody. So if you want to drop a question in the Q&A, I will definitely get to those, but I do have some that were pre-submitted. And I do want to add a note that in this current budget, actually, I just was on a call where they mentioned that in the most recent appropriations for the National Park Service, the maintenance budget was cut in half. So and that was in this FY26. So when you talk about maintenance versus
If those were
historical
2024 numbers, yeah, no, it's a way worse story right now.
Yeah. So just, you
Yeah.
know, this work is more important because you
Yeah.
know, anyways, all right. That's my doom and gloom. Let's move on. Let me get up. Okay. So, this is probably an AJ question and maybe a little bit of me too, but why did Shenandoah and the trust choose to restore Boulder Cabin as opposed to other historical structures in the park? Because I think there's like 300 historical structures in the park, right?
Yeah, I think I wondered that myself a little bit, because I was thinking when I got here I was going to go straight to Rapidan. I assumed when I was looking at structures, but I think there was already a turnkey project ready that was kind of in the hopper with our facility management team, and the building was at a greater state of risk. Everybody tells me that it was pretty much on the condemned list prior to our involvement. So in 2019, Historic Preservation Training Center built a historic structures report, showed the validity of maintaining this resource, and also kind of pointed out the process to fix it. The trust saw it, I guess, liked it, and wanted it, and really invested in the like building blueprints and everything for us, giving us a map to work off of.
Yeah. Yeah, I think from the park or trust perspective, it was just a great historic building, and this idea that you could also bring in, you know, it's in Skyland Park, and so there's a lot of visitors there. So this idea that you could really bring in the visitor experience into that historic space by using it as an artist in residence cabin was just very compelling for us. Okay, here is another question. What were the most surprising or challenging problems you found once you began this work?
Okay, surprising would be how little structural damage there was outside of everything flattening out and collapsing, it seems. The Wormy chestnut might be that, and modern cherry are my favorite woods to work with. They're forgiving, sturdy. Wormy American chestnut, I'm in love with it as far as working with it. It's rigid and it's durable and it lasts, except for it becoming extinct with blight. But as a building resource, it's an incredible product. I love it. And I think the other thing was, well, I guess I can't think of any off the top of my head, maybe not. But no, the building was still, the bones of the building were solid. And like I said before, if that building, if you put it 70 miles away in a valley somewhere, it's done. I mean, it would have been gone. It's definitely because it's sitting on a bunch of boulders and it has airflow through.
That's great. How do you source historically appropriate materials? Kind of looking at rehab or restoration, particularly. How do you make those decisions and where do you find that stuff? Because I've been pretty impressed, AJ, with the
So
materials you're showing up with.
that can be tough. That can be very tough. And it's even tougher when you I had a plethora of people, and even in Wyoming when I worked with Katherine for a little bit, you find places that can do it. You have to research it because there's not a lot of sawmills around. There are lumber mills that can give you this sort of stuff. And what I'm trying to do is find a sympathetic. I can't find Wormy chestnut. However, we've done the park. I will give them credit. They've lacked on some preservation stuff, but what they did do is they deconstructed old Wormy buildings, and there's a huge architectural salvage of Wormy chestnut in our archive. So a lot of the like the siding boards or anything we're coming up short on, we're going to infill with extant Wormy chestnut. But it is hard, Jessica. That part is really hard. It was really hard to find siding. It's hard to, you know, sawmills aren't that common anymore, but when you find a good one, they're so happy that people are interested, they're going to find it for you sometimes. So that's really been my method. But what I do want to do always, and that is important to talk about here, is you don't want to put the wrong species of wood against another species of wood. You don't want to put pressure treated wood against an old piece of Wormy chestnut. You don't want something that is going to press moisture into an old. You want that the historic wood matters first, always. So whatever I put in there is going to be a similar grain species and cut pattern. I learned that in a training 10 years ago with Katherine, with a wood scientist, and it has served me well.
Great. Okay, here's an audience question. Are there other historical structures in need of similar effort in Shenandoah?
Yes. Yes. Yes, my focus since I've been there has been on Boulder because it's just a two-person crew. It's me and another partner. We at one time we were going to have about five, is what I thought when I took this job. But that's okay too. But I really think Rapidan, the Hoover Camp is in need of some care. I went down there recently. I was replacing a door. I still get tasked with other things around the park, and I was replacing a door, and the cabin itself has so much integrity. It's a beautiful spot. It's tranquil. It fits everything you're looking for in an idyllic restoration spot. Um, I think there's quite a bit there. I think I like the Pinnacles Research Facility. I think that the question always is what do we want to do with it? What is our operating cost after we get it? We don't want to just make every building because I mean, there's hundreds of buildings I could pick, but a lot of these, and then another, even outside of the presidential cabins that do need to be fixed or worked on, we have a lot of Appalachian like trail cabins and stuff that need to be touched, and that's
Yeah.
we have to scale operations if we're ever going to even be able to touch those, I think.
Yeah. So this is probably last question, and this may be, I mean, probably you both, but Katherine particularly, how do you document kind of what we're doing in these buildings and sort of preserving that sort of process and documentation and maybe the importance of it in the last few minutes we have here?
The importance of documentation.
Yeah.
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 Oh, so critical. And it's funny, the age of digital cameras in our hands has made it better and worse. Better in that, back in the day, picture doing some preservation work in the 30s, getting out your large format camera to take a still shot. You probably wouldn't have taken as many photos. And so the blessing is we have a ton of images. The curse is that they often just stay on people's phones. So where I worked at the Western Center for Historic Preservation, and AJ I know does this as well. You develop a record of treatment, and not only do you put the photo and a caption in it. And those are kind of your select priority photos that kind of talk through what you did. And then you also have metadata attached to all of the photos, like every single photo. And I have been saved by the fact that someone had 400 photos of a cabin, because we don't know what's behind that wall, but someone took a photo before they covered it back up. And now we know, there's, okay, there was enough structure in there. We don't need to go back. Or that's not why that wall is uh, sloping or something like that, because we've been able to look back in it. But I cannot underscore enough the importance of documenting your work and documenting even before you begin, so that it's clear that the work you did is consistent with the conditions, meaning the style, type, species, et cetera, that AJ was talking about.
Great. Well, that's all the questions I have for you guys. Any last words or comments?
Well, I would like to thank you, Jessica, for presenting this. Obviously, I had it in a slideshow and I thought it was going to be too emotional, but I thank you so much for all you've done. This has been a great year. I love this affiliation with the park. It's been great. You guys as a partner have been helpful. I said it's been a nice, like a trade wind pushing us, helping us navigate these difficult times, and it's been very pleasant. And Boulder has been a fun thing that I'll remember forever.
Well, thanks.
So thank you.
I definitely gave him some cookies or something for that. It's been a pleasure working with you too, AJ, and I look forward to more projects working with you and Katherine too. I've enjoyed getting to know you guys, and I appreciate your time tonight. And I want to thank everybody on the call tonight for spending some time with us, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you.